And Ness, take it away.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Kate. And thank you to the entire Entrepreneurship Center at the University of Oregon for recognizing the opportunity to combine artistic and entrepreneurship practices to help artists achieve their own professional goals. So as Kate mentioned, I'm a musician. I've played violin for the most of my life, arts management, producer, fundraiser. Arts have been a large focus of my life for the majority of it. And over the past, more recently, 6 months, year or so, I've delved really deeply into researching innovation within the arts and the creative sector as a whole. It's a large goal of mine to help shape the conversation around the creative sector, to reveal the true value of the arts and what they provide within our society. So as Kate said, this is a recorded session, ideally to allow for students to revisit this topic at their leisure and for anybody else as well. So during this hour, we're going to cover the state of the arts in our economy today, very briefly, the artist's mindset, the entrepreneur's mindset, and how the two can work together. And we'll also offer a couple of activities, one that takes a stab at expanding the role of the artist in society, especially in relation to societal challenges, and another that leads to generating true value propositions through benefit recognition, how to communicate those benefits to your audience, and also recognizing how your product, your service, your art differentiates from other offerings around, all with an aim to more greatly monetize our crafts. So the takeaway overall, before we start to get into it, is to introduce entrepreneurial thinking as an integrated part of becoming a successful artist. And success can be defined in many different ways, but for this specifically is being able to support ourselves as a vocation as an artist and recognize and communicate the value that the artists are bringing to society, and really being okay with being paid for that craft. So as artists, we have the responsibility to evolve our way of communicating forms, especially as the world around us evolves. As artists, we have the opportunity to leverage our creativity to make the world a better place. And it's an opportunity not just to spend so much time and energy on our craft, but an opportunity to use that creativity for the business side and the entrepreneurial side of things as well. So we can help solve these societal problems, large and small, and that's especially challenging and important in this digital and attention economy. So another goal is to embrace the power of entrepreneurship as a way for artists to gain some additional recognition for the value that you all bring to our society. And that will hopefully lead to again, monetizing each of your crafts. So the workshop was originally designed for the student. It's hosted by the University of Oregon. However, it can be very useful for anybody in the community, for professional artists, musicians, arts managers, and other professionals in the sector. And this is just a small piece of the puzzle, as many of us on this call today and throughout the country and the world are really working to create a more robust system of economic recognition for the creative sector. So I ask that over this next hour, this is a place to be vulnerable, to take risks, and to have some fun, and just to be creative, to flex those creative muscles that we all have. There are two books that I want to recommend on this topic. The first one is The Artist Entrepreneur. And it's just sort of a practical technician book about what some basic business skills and entrepreneurial skills are for an artist to succeed. It's written by a couple of professors from USC and Clemson. It doesn't go very deep into what needs to be done, but it is a good launching off point. And it touches a little bit on some of what we're going to be doing today. And the second book, it came out recently during the pandemic. It's called The Death of the Artist. And It's by a Portland author. It's not. I don't love the name. I think the arts should be living, but it does provide a good conversation around the state of the arts, and some good history and historical facts about how the arts have been essentially less and less supported by societies over time. Okay, so are there any comments? You can type them in the chat before we get started. Any questions? Definitely want to make sure that that this is as engaging as can be. We're trying to cover a lot over this hour, so please feel free to type into the chat. And it looks like, yeah, Kate definitely, she linked.
Ness, I wanted to also ask you, do you have a PowerPoint? Would you like to share screen or not? I forgot.
I will like to share a screen. It's not a very complex PowerPoint, but it'll be helpful during the activities.
Okay, very good. I'll set you up here.
Awesome. Okay, so let's get started. In today's world, we have, also I'm taking a look at notes, so it looks like if I'm looking off screen, I'm not. I'm just looking at my notes. So, so today in our world, we have so many options for how an artist can communicate their work, and specifically digital options that have become available in the past decade and a half. I'm sure we could all name a few. Just the biggest ones: YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, Facebook, and other social media platforms. And these digital opportunities have created ways for artists, of course, to communicate their work, which can be a very, very positive and good thing. However, it's also allowed for anybody in the world to have access to these platforms, and anyone can be an artist. So we've seen this big rise of the amateur artist, which has created so much traffic in the world. It's hard to dig through everything to understand and realize and recognize and consume what the quality art is that we all enjoy. So the accessibility of this vast amount and various levels of quality of art has trained the arts consumer to value two things: quantity, wanting so much art available at any given time, and price, to have it for free or for next to nothing, either a short, small subscription, or just to be able to look at a piece of art on Instagram or whatever it may be. So quantity and price are two things that that the consumer is pretty much expecting in today's economy. So, as a strong advocate for high quality art myself, and also as an advocate for creating access to creative expression across all levels, I want to be clear that some art, especially in this attention era, where there's so much going on at all times, some art should definitely be kept private. Not all art, in my opinion, deserves to be on Instagram, deserves to be on YouTube, deserves to be creating a much more distraction from art that has been slaved over. There has been a technical proficiency over hours and weeks and years and decades that has gone into the creation of a lot of these pieces that we would like to see. So accessibility of art should be quality art, which again legitimizes this creative sector. So these activities that we're going to be focused on will be most successful if we start to really think about how we can combine the entrepreneur and the artist, the different ways of thinking, which we'll get to in just a little bit. So an important note is, and I'm sure we all know this, that there is this societal belief that artists should not get paid for their work because they're doing what they love to do. And in my opinion, this is one of the most disappointing and embarrassing arguments that I've ever heard. And yet it still dominates the narrative. If we were to say the same thing about any other profession, about a doctor or an engineer, oh, we shouldn't pay doctors. You know, they love what they do. Well, the amount of time and energy and devotion to that proficiency, to train to become an expert, is something that we as a society has deemed very valuable, and we pay for those services. So we do it for a lot of other sectors. Unfortunately, we don't embrace that concept for the arts. And that's something that we have to be very, very true to ourselves about. We do that for other fields, except for the arts, and we need to, in a way, embrace it. So we've created an environment where artists, even if they are the top of their technical field, cannot break through the traffic that has been created by amateur artists. And again, artists spend countless hours, years, decades on their art. And today, artists spend about 50% of their time, not just creating their art, but on the administrative and managerial duties of trying to build an audience, of trying to communicate potentially their benefits to that audience, and to make a living. And that percentage is only increasing. The amount of time that artists are spending away from their art is increasing. And again, that's just it's a fact. We need to embrace it. And the proper amount of effort needs to be focused on generating an audience and connecting with them. And it can be very fun, as we'll see, hopefully, in just a little bit. So every student who is studying an art form needs to understand that it's crucial that they be their own researcher and marketer, business manager. The entrepreneur has a very similar mindset as well. So Kate is the director of cross-programming for the University of Oregon, focused on entrepreneurship and creating access for entrepreneurial programs, but she also has a history in the arts as well, and can provide a unique perspective of what it's like to be in the mindset of an artist and what it's like to be in the mindset as well as an entrepreneur. And I'd love to ask Kate to share a little bit about her background as an art historian and what drove her into the field of entrepreneurship.
Well, thanks, Ness. Yeah, I would say, there's so much similarities that I see in terms of artists and entrepreneurs. One of the things, if you have the fortune of going to an art college, art school, or in general, just something you do as an artist, is you constantly have to think about how you communicate your art, right? Whether that's a personal statement that you include for gallery showings, or as a way to sort of describe what you're doing. You have to describe and pitch yourself in what your art is all about. I also see a lot of similarities, having gone through art school, of the critique, something that all artists have to go through, where literally you are put in a room and have your peers and faculty tear you apart in terms of trying to really understand what you're trying to say through your art. And that kind of defense or communication is very comparable to how an entrepreneur has to go about securing investors, selling their product, and so forth. So my journey really from art history to entrepreneurship really was, there was something already there that was really comparable. And as I've shared with Ness before, having the fortune of looking at the history of art, it was really only in the 19th century that you find artists beginning to make art for their own sake. Up until really about 1840, 1850, did you find artists actually having to make art for a patron. And so it was a more commercial relationship, and it's really only been within the last, over 150 years that you see artists making art for their own sort of personal edification and sharing what they're hoping to achieve through their art. So that's just a few little perspectives that I see in terms of the commonalities coming from sort of that art history perspective.
Wonderful, thank you, Kate. And there's I'll add a little bit about the artist mindset, that we do spend so much time and energy in the creation of these pieces, and we want to be recognized for that. And it can be demoralizing oftentimes to not have that recognition, and to not have the skills to be able to share the creation that we've made. And hopefully that's what we're going to be focusing on today. So there is a synchronicity between these two mindsets. It requires trial and error, being a specialist in our craft, being an expert, being proactive, and also expressing the passion that we have either for the startup business idea or whatever art form, the craft that we're perfecting as well. So the main challenges of the artist today align with many of the challenges of the entrepreneur as well. And those are really defining clearly what the art form is, the art form or the product or the service, and associating that service with something that it's trying to solve, some sort of problem. And second challenge is finding the right audience, right? Who is it that is going to be invested in the service that I'm providing, and why? The third is communicating that benefit, understanding that there's this open relationship in communicating an open dialogue between the audience and the artist. And then amongst communicating your benefit, there are many other aspects that we're going to be exploring a little bit later on, including differentiation. How is it that your art form is different than what else is out there for consumers? But doing all of this, defining the product and associating with their solution and finding the right audience and communicating that benefit, doing all that with confidence and also with a sense of humility and doing it with trial and error. And there's this concept in the entrepreneur's world that is to build a prototype, to test the prototype, to receive feedback about that prototype, and then to tweak it, and then to test it again, and then to receive feedback and to tweak it, and wash, rinse, repeat. And it's a very similar sort of process that the artist can embrace. So to try to tackle these challenges and apply the creative entrepreneur or the entrepreneurial creative, I like to call it, mindset to our work, I'd like to propose an activity, and I call it the artist hero. And it was originally inspired by a similar activity by one of Kate's colleagues, Andrew Nelson, who's the VP of Innovation and Entrepreneurship at the University of Oregon. And this combines the artistic self with a problem that exists in the world, big or small. It can be so big or it can be so small that it only matters to one person, yourself, and that's it. And it's a fun, creative example of how to get our creative juices flowing when it comes to monetizing our craft. So I'll give you a short example. Some of you who know me may have remembered about 8 years ago when I lived in Washington, D.C. I lived across the street from a grocery store, from the Harris Teeter in Adams Morgan. And I loved that grocery store. It was great. I'd go there all the time, except for one thing that I didn't love, which was I didn't carry a product that I absolutely loved at the time in my early mid-20s, which was Swiss Miss chocolate pudding. I absolutely loved it, and they didn't carry it. And I went up to them and I said, "Hey, would you be able to carry this product? I love it." And they said, time after again, no, for X, Y, and Z reasons. Oh, we can't get the provider. Oh, it's too expensive. Not as many people want it. There isn't the demand. And one evening, I was on Sunday evening, I was sitting up on my roof, and I took my violin out, and I started to just play. I started to play some Bach. I started to play some jazz. I started to play, just improvise, engage with the people, with the shoppers who were going into the Harris Teeter. And all of a sudden, there was this small crowd, 5, 10, 15, 20 people who started to stop and listen to this not really high quality music. I mean, I'm not the best musician, but I was able to engage in a unique way. And I started to do this every Sunday evening, and it started to become a tradition in the Adams Morgan neighborhood. There would be people who would come specifically to that Harris Teeter on Sunday evenings to shop with the chance of maybe seeing this crazy fiddler on the roof. And I recognized that there was this this kind of new dynamic that had been created, and I had a little bit of power. So I went to the Harris Teeter across the street, and I said, "Hey, listen, I'm that crazy musician on top of the roof across the street." And they said, "Oh my gosh, yes, we've been having like increased sales. There's been a greater demand on Sunday evenings, especially. So thank you. This is great." And I said, "Well, you know, I've also really been wanting this Swiss Miss chocolate pudding. Is there any way that you could offer this in your store now?" And not needing to really go into, okay, well, I'm going to stop playing. You're going to lose demand. It's not going to be here. And they said, yes, this is something that we can provide. We can do this for you. So that's just a small example of what an artist hero might be. It's a tiny, tiny problem. It doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, but it can be applied through this 5-step activity that we're going to go through right now for each of us. So I'm going to share my screen really quickly, and again, I'm going to ask for just risk-taking, creativity, and participation in some way, shape, or form. So this is just some photos of me fiddling on the roof, kind of fun. And the first part of the activity is to just take 60 seconds, embrace this time. Don't stop writing if you can. Write down as many problems that exist in the world today. Any problems that you can think of. It can be big, it can be small, it can be social, it can be environmental, it could be anything that you can think of. So I'm going to start a timer, and let's do that. The timer begins now. About 15 seconds left. Okay. So I'm curious if if you could type into the chat, or maybe Kate can unmute people. What problems exist in the world? It could be anything. What did you come up with? All right, too much plastic. Overfishing. Elizabeth is totally right. There's a lot that can be said about the timing of this. So there's a lot of problems out there: depression, fear, safety, low sales, employee divisiveness, racism, income inequality, climate, political climate, democracy, racism, so much. And there's a lot of themes that people are feeling. There's a distance between this emotional, ideological, physical inequality, the quick tempo of life, education. These are all great. These are huge problems. There are so many problems, and I like to call them opportunities for how we can embrace the power of our own skills, and we're talking about our crafts and the art, to perhaps shift the needle a little bit for each of these problems. So selfishness, all these are still coming in, climate issues, and continue to write them in. They're so big, and I want to move on. We're about halfway through right now. I want to move on to the next part of this activity, which is to choose one of those problems, something that's very passionate, or it could be anything. It could be just for the purposes of this exercise. Choose one and write down in 2 minutes this time. So it's a little bit harder to think of all the solutions that are available. think of as many solutions to one problem that you can think of. And again, don't stop writing, expand your creative minds. It can be foolish solutions. It could be things that don't even make sense, but let's go ahead and we'll start now. About 1 minute left. Okay, so I'm not going to ask for what the solutions are, but I'm curious if you could just count them up real quick. How many solutions did you come up with? Connor says 6. Nessa says 6. 6 is like the magic number. Selena says 4. I'm moving around 8. There are multiple options, and I'm sure if we were to spend a little bit more time and actually be able to engage with people a little bit, there would be so many more solutions, and the power of connection and networking and community really can provide so much more option for what sort of solutions, and brainstorming this together is really, really powerful. So to move on, now we're going to explore this concept of the problem and the solution and relate it to our own creative craft. So in 60 seconds, again, I want you to apply those solutions that you came up with to the problem in a way that includes your own artistic craft. And it can be completely crazy, but it hopefully will allow us to start thinking a little bit differently about how to use our skills, our creative craft. So what is your unique craft? First of all, be very, very specific, and take 60 seconds just to write down one sentence that really embraces what your craft is. Okay, so now it's the really fun part, the last part of this activity for right now, which is to combine the two. And we're going to take a couple of minutes and use that detailed description of your craft and think about what possible artistic solutions exist to that problem that you were focusing on. Take a look at your list of solutions and insert your craft into that solution. And again, just be creative, come up with things that make sense, that don't make sense. You can share them, you can not share them. This is for you. I'd love to hear some examples afterwards at the end. So let's take 2 minutes and then we'll reconnect. Okay, so I'm wondering, and Kate, would you be willing to unmute everyone if possible? I'm wondering what you came up with. What was, if you could mention the problem and the artistic solution that that exists. So are there any examples that you can think of? Any volunteers that would like to take a stab at this? And yeah, feel free to unmute yourselves.
Sure. Well, I just have a problem with COVID isolation as an artist. I'm used to going on art walks and meeting with groups and drawing on Saturdays. So I was thinking, how can I combine this pandemic, this isolation, with maybe like a sketchbook idea, like my sketchbook theory? And I'm thinking I could reach out to folks and have them share their pandemic stories, like things that they're doing or just funny things or even sad things. And then I could draw them in my sketchbook and then share them on my Facebook page or share them on my website and kind of connect that way, maybe. I don't know. It's kind of crazy, but that's what I came up with.
Wonderful. That's a great idea. Yeah. Embrace this moment to make deeper connections with people through art. That's great. What other problems and solutions did people come up with?
I'll go.
Yes, Selena.
So in Dallas, where I'm at right now, a big problem that was evident before the pandemic, and certainly even more now, I think, is how siloed our arts organizations here are. There's not a lot of artistic collaboration. There are these one-off things. I work at the Dallas Museum of Art, and we have a number of partnerships, but it's not like anything is very long-term, sustained for the long term. And I see that as a problem, especially now, because we are now by force have been siloed even more. And how do we address that? And my experience as a producer and as a production manager has always been really beneficial in actually bringing people together. And I've had this conversation with a couple of leaders, and those conversations have gone nowhere. And in reflecting through this activity, that's my responsibility. Maybe if I really want to see that collaboration happen, get some, heads in a room, as it were, on Zoom, and say, I recognize your potential and the strengths that each of you bring to trying to solve this problem. So let's try to solve it together. And that's kind of where I'm at. And I've been thinking about it a lot, but now having participated in this activity, it's kind of made me realize I'm the one that's going to have to make that happen. But that's, yeah. So.
And you can make that happen. So it's a really exciting thing. Thank you for sharing that. Just maybe one more example, problem, solution we'd like to share. I think it's really valuable for everybody to hear what people are going through, especially during this time in the pandemic, whether it's personally or organizationally. And so obviously there's a major theme with being able to connect with other people through art.
I'll go. So I'm living out in Curry County, now in Oregon, which is known as a really poor area. And the problem I chose is wealth inequality. And the artistic thing I chose was just kind of cooking and baking. I would say is my one go-to. And I thought one of the main things is that there's a lot of interesting local cuisine down here that like no one's familiar with, because no one really thinks much of Curry County when it comes to Oregon. So being able to collaborate with fellow people who like love to share their own food and recipe, and just that sense of community that we're like longing for nowadays, and being able to maybe promote it online or to customers that our local business sells to, things like that, might give them a sense of joy, and being able to share with other people what they love to do. So something like that, some sort of crazy recipe collaboration with a bunch of the locals out here would be pretty fun.
That's awesome. That's such a great idea. It's such a big problem, and it's in a way such a simple solution to bring people together through that craft. And I think that leads really well into this this next part of this final section of this session, which has to do with building that value proposition. How at this point we've identified a clear problem that exists in the world, or many problems, and have come up with possible solutions, and really you have no idea if it will work. Right? Some of the problems, some of the solutions are just, they're probably pretty out there because you haven't tested it yet. We don't know. We haven't engaged with the possible community. Connor, you could embrace so many people with the power of bringing people together through cooking, but it could also flop. Nobody might want to be interested. People could be scared to share even ideas because there's this fear of connection in a way, even though it doesn't really make sense to be separate if you're not socially distant. So the next step in this creative entrepreneurship process is to find some people. You're not going to do this right now, but it would be to share this potential solution with, to talk to them about it, to have an interview with them about it. And if you can, build a small prototype to offer a hint of what this might look like without investing too much time or energy beyond what you've already done. And ask each of them individually what they think of it, and probably more importantly at this point, because of the need to monetize our craft, if they express an interest, this is yes, that there is a connection and a possibility of this. Now it's time to talk about willingness to pay. And it's very challenging to do that sometimes. It's an art, it's a science, there's no one best way to do that. But there is a good way to start, and that's to engage with who is interested. You're starting to identify your target audience and ask what they're willing to pay for this potential service. It may not be the exact service, but you're starting this conversation. You're starting to narrow down a range of possibilities for monetary value of what you're able to offer. So the customer's willingness to pay is a really crucial aspect of eventually monetizing your art. Of course, it's not easy. It involves trial and error. It's understanding what other services are out there as well in the immediate community and the community at large, and understanding how your service and your offerings differ from what else is offered. So just to recap really quickly, being a creative entrepreneur involves a few main elements: the artistic integrity, of course, a clear problem that you are passionate about, a clear offering of a solution to the people who are impacted by that problem, and an understanding of the benefits that your audience is receiving. There are a few others as well: competitors, willingness to try and fail, a dedication to this process, of this cyclical process of trial and error. And we're going to do a short, small activity around value propositions of really trying to communicate the benefit of your work to the community in just a second. But I want to stress the opportunity to take more time after this session and write down your personal artistic mission statement. What is it that is so valuable to you as an artist that you can communicate to your potential audience? What is the essence of your art? And this I guarantee will help you lead to understanding what your own value proposition is, which is a concept in the business world that I like to share with the artistic world as well. So I want to go a little bit deeper into what a value proposition is before we end. I think it's really important. And do a little activity. So a value proposition essentially is what we just talked about over the past few minutes. It's understanding what value you are giving to your audience, clearly identifying who your audience is, what specific benefits the audience is receiving, and why they should be choosing you as a client, and what differentiates you compared to what else is out there. So a couple of just business value proposition examples. The Dollar Shave Club, a great shave for a few bucks a month, no commitment, no fees, no BS, do it. For Spotify, soundtrack your life. Let Spotify bring you the right music for every mood and moment, the perfect songs for your workout, your night in, or your journey to work. Of course, you can tell these are also sort of marketing examples. They lead to, these are honed, and they can be landing page languages that exist to communicate what it is that you're providing. For SoundCloud, find the music you love, discover new tracks, and connect directly with your favorite artists. So those are just a couple of examples of some value propositions, and now it's going to be our turn to try to create our own, or do some activities that lead to understanding what the value proposition is and being able to communicate it as our artists. So for the next 2 minutes, and we're getting down to the wire here, we just have 12 minutes left, write down what the problem is that you are interested in. It could be the same problem as before. And this is something that, again, you would want to invest a lot more time into later on. What is the meaning of your art? Who is it impacting? Who is willing to listen, see, and pay for this art form? So write down what the problem is, who specifically has the problem, which is very, very important. And then what's the solution? And your detailed craft, of course, is a part of that solution. And then finally, why why your solution and not somebody else's. What makes yours different? What makes it valuable? What benefits are your audiences receiving that they won't get from any other option? Hopefully you've had a chance to at least start this activity, and you can continue it later on. I encourage you to. And there's more to it, of course. We want to identify and be very specific about the benefits that the audience is receiving. Describe in writing, it's very important to write this down, what makes these benefits valuable. And they could be benefits that are functional, they could be benefits that are experimental, they could be benefits that are emotional, it could be any kind of benefits. And oftentimes in the arts, of course, there is this emotional connection of benefit. The main problem of the customer, again, connecting the value of your art to whatever that problem is and being very specific about what that value is. And then again, differentiating yourself as the preferred provider of this value. And these, if you can answer all these things very clearly in sentences that aren't like this in the very beginning, it doesn't, you can't come up with this immediately, but write a paragraph, write a few sentences, narrow it down to 3 sentences, to 2 sentences, then to 1 sentence. And the shorter and more concise the value proposition is to yourself, the more your target audience is going to be able to connect with what you are offering. So with the remaining session time, I just want to give a little recap and then maybe offer some tips of the bigger picture, and hopefully spend some time either answering questions or having a dialogue, a comment about where this workshop could potentially lead to each of you. So again, I think it's so important to spend time writing down your artistic mission statement that's personal to you. What value are you bringing to your audience? What is the essence of your art? And then this will help lead to the value proposition. So in the digital economy, in the attention economy, we need to reveal the contributions that artists can truly make and reward creatives for the dedication to this work. And there's obviously so much more that we can dive into. We don't have the time today. This is just the tip of the iceberg of how artists can embrace the entrepreneurial thinking to monetize your craft, clarity, specificity, and connection with a very specific target audience, and to create ultimately a better world for all of us. So with that, I'd love to open it up over the next 5-7 minutes to any questions that you have. Hopefully I can answer, or any comments about what's happening in your artistic lives today. And again, I think it's possible for you to unmute yourselves. And yeah, we have just a few minutes left. And if you need to go, I understand that too. And I want to thank you for your time and your energy and your willingness to participate in the combination of these two worlds of the artistic mind and the entrepreneurial mind. So thank you.
Ness, I have a question.
Yes.
Respective of what I offered earlier, one of the things that I think others like me that have posed this question struggle with in Dallas in particular, and I'm from Dallas, so I can say this very confidently. It's a very vain city. It's a very pick yourself up by your bootstraps kind of, young city that values wealth and places a lot of emphasis within that wealth on your status in the city. And I'm sure I'm not the only one that lives in a city that has that problem. But what I've encountered before and what colleagues of mine here have encountered before is similar, is that if the value proposition isn't really, really high, as in I'm going to charge you $150,000 and I've had my name splashed across the New York Times or in other papers or anything like that, I'm not of value, despite the fact that, for instance, I and other individuals grew up here. We got our career starts in the arts here. We went other places and did, really tremendous things, have these incredible CVs. And it's not like, oh, come home and we will embrace and consider these ideas you have. We've been doing this just fine. We don't need anybody's help. And if we do, we're going to pull somebody out of New York or Los Angeles or Chicago or even DC before we're going to come to, the son or daughter of the city. And I'm interested to know what your thoughts are on how you really build that value proposition when you have that kind of attitude towards you as a local. You're just a local. You're not, and this isn't about race or anything like that. It's just, well, you're from Dallas. What do you really have to offer? What have you really done? It's a very tremendous problem here.
Yeah, thank you for posing that problem. And I don't honestly know that that I have the solution to that. What I can say is, within the entrepreneurial world and the artistic world, it is important to, again, focus on who the audience is, right? Mm-hmm. Who is it that you want to be engaging with and that is willing to pay for it? And I know it can feel as if you're a salmon swimming upstream sometimes, but ultimately, the salmon have a destination as well. And most of the time, as long as there aren't as many dams out there, barriers, they get to that destination. Mm-hmm. And so it can feel throughout the process that you're making, you're taking steps backwards. Mm-hmm. And that is okay. It's something to persevere through. Mm-hmm. And I think it's so important, even in places that it's difficult to connect with individuals. Mm-hmm. I think it's so important to practice empathy, to practice this way of understanding that each of us exists in our own right, in our own realm. We are all humans, and one small idea, of course, could be, well, let's embrace the idea that people want to engage with people outside of Dallas, and mm-hmm. and Dallas could be the hub of bringing other people in, right, from New York, from DC, from Chicago, from mm-hmm. All these experts, and become an expert in bringing people in from mm-hmm. other sides. So, a combination of persevering, of understanding that it is part of the process, of really truly trying to make those human connections, and embracing who the audience is. And I don't know if Kate, you have anything to add to that.
No, but I would say that what you're finding in the arts in Dallas, we find in Oregon in the entrepreneurial community, because you struck a note in terms of our state's government has it's hired an outside consultant from another state to sort of assess the landscape of entrepreneurship in our state. So I hear and I feel what you're going through, Selena. You know, one thought would be is a lot of times, you know, looking at the power players in your community, whether that's philanthropic foundations, who have more of a sort of profile and have the ability to lead those conversations and trying to develop strong relationships with them. I find that foundations tend to be more empathetic, as Ness highlighted, to serving their local population. And being very open that you want to have a seat at the table, if you will, to have a stronger sort of a collaborative relationship with who is essentially leading your arts community.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate, for adding that. And you can see in the chat, Selena, it is a great question, as Kelly Johnson said, and she's representative for Arts and Business Alliance of Eugene. It's not a unique problem to Dallas, of course. As you know, as Kate said, Eugene has it. There are so many places that have that problem. So with that, you know, I hope that there has been some value that you've gained from this hour, if nothing else, maybe to connect with people in a time when we're all isolated, and maybe to have some fun and think about our art in perhaps a slightly different way. I just sent my email in the chat. Feel free to reach out to me, and I hope we are able to offer similar opportunities in the future. And again, I thank you for your time and your energy, and wish all of you well.